The forest was still dark when Lyra Voss slipped out of the great stone house at Blackthorn Ridge. She did not look back at the tall windows or the carved doors that had closed behind her only hours before as a married woman. She walked fast, her bare feet pressing into the cold grass, her wedding cloak left folded neatly on the bed like an apology. By the time the sun rose over the pine trees, the whole pack knew their new queen was gone. Alpha King Cale Ashford stood in the courtyard with his fists clenched at his sides. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of quiet strength that made rooms go silent when he entered them. But that morning, his silence was not calm. It was cold and sharp, like the edge of a blade. "Find her," he said to his guards. Before nightfall, no one dared ask why she had run. No one dared say what many were already whispering, that she had married him only because her family forced her to, that she had never wanted this bond, that perhaps she never wanted him at all. But one person in Blackthorn Ridge knew the truth, and he was not standing in the courtyard with the others. He was sitting alone at the edge of the forest, in a small broken-down cabin that the pack had forgotten long ago. His name was Ren. Years earlier, Ren had been cast out of the pack. He was an Omega, the lowest rank among the wolves, and when a fire had destroyed part of the old training hall, the blame had fallen on him. He had not started that fire, but no one had listened. He had been marked as dangerous, stripped of his place among his people, and left to survive alone at the edge of the territory. Since then, he rarely spoke to anyone. The pack called him the Broken One, not because his body was weak, but because they believed his spirit was. What they did not know was that Lyra had come to him 3 nights before her wedding. She had found his cabin by accident, lost during a walk she was not supposed to take alone. Instead of running from him, the way most did, she had sat down across from his small fire and asked him why he lived so far from everyone else. He had not expected kindness from a woman soon to be queen, but she had looked at him without fear, without pity, only curiosity, and somehow, in that quiet cabin, they had talked for hours. She told him she did not want to marry Cale, not because she hated him, she barely knew him, but because the marriage had been arranged too quickly, under strange circumstances. Her older sister was supposed to be the bride, promised to Cale months earlier as part of a peace agreement between their 2 packs. But 2 weeks before the wedding, the pack elders had suddenly changed the arrangement. Lyra was to marry Cale instead. No one gave her a real reason. Her family only said it was for the good of both packs. But Lyra was not a woman who accepted silence easily. She had spent those 2 weeks searching through old ledgers and letters in her family's study, trying to understand why the switch had happened so suddenly. And on the night before her wedding, she found something that made her blood run cold. A single page, torn and hidden between 2 boring records of trade agreements, listed a plan, not for peace, but for land. Her family's ancestral territory, rich with water and fertile soil, was to be quietly transferred into Cale's pack control once the marriage was complete. Her sister, who knew the land laws well, would have noticed the trick immediately. But Lyra, younger and less involved in politics, was seen as easier to fool. She did not believe Cale himself had planned it. She had heard enough about him to know he valued honesty, even if he was strict and serious. But someone close to him, someone in his own council, had arranged this deception, using her as a pawn. She could not prove it yet. She only had 1 torn page, and torn pages were easy for powerful men to deny. "If I stay," she told Ren that night, "they will find a way to silence me before I can find real proof. But if I run, and if I return with the truth, they cannot deny what is written in their own hidden records." Ren had listened carefully. He understood, more than anyone else in the pack, what it felt like to be blamed for something you did not do, and to have no voice loud enough to defend yourself. He believed her. "There is an old shrine at the northern border," he told her. "It once belonged to your family's ancestors, before the land was divided. If there are old land agreements, they may be kept there, sealed away and forgotten." That was where she had gone. Now, as the pack searched the forests and mountains close to Blackthorn Ridge, Ren sat quietly, deciding what to do. He could stay silent and protect himself. If Cale or his guards suspected he had helped her, they might punish him for it, exile him even further, or worse. But if he stayed silent, Lyra might be caught before she could return with proof, and the conspiracy would be buried forever. He thought of the way she had looked at him that night, not as a broken Omega, but as a person worth listening to. He stood up, grabbed his worn cloak, and walked toward the pack's main hall. The guards at the door narrowed their eyes when they saw him approaching. It had been years since Ren dared to step this close to the center of pack life, but he did not stop walking until he stood before Kale himself, who was pacing near the large fireplace, his jaw tight with anger and worry. "I know where she went," Ren said. Kale turned sharply. For a moment, his eyes were full of disbelief, then suspicion. "Why would you know anything about my wife?" "Because she trusted me enough to tell me the truth," Ren answered. "The truth you have not been told." Kale's guards moved to grab him, assuming he meant to threaten the king somehow, but Kale raised a hand to stop them. Something in Ren's voice, steady, unafraid, and honest, made him pause. "Speak," Kale said. So Ren told him everything. About the torn page. About the land agreement hidden in ancient records. About Lyra's fear that someone in Kale's own council had used their marriage to steal her family's territory. He explained that she had not run from Kale out of hatred, but to protect the truth before it could be destroyed. Kale's anger did not disappear, but it changed shape. It was no longer directed at Lyra. It turned, cold and dangerous, toward the people closest to him, the council members he had trusted since childhood. "Take me to her," Kale said. Ren hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I will guide you, but you must promise something first." Kale's eyes narrowed. "You dare bargain with me?" "I am not bargaining for myself," Ren said quietly. "I am asking you to actually listen when we find her. Not command her, not blame her. Listen." For a long moment, Kale said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I will listen." They set out before midday, moving quickly through the forest paths that most of the guards did not know existed, paths Ren had learned during his years of solitary wandering. Kale rode beside him in silence, his thoughts clearly heavy with the weight of betrayal he had not yet confirmed, but already feared to be true. By the time they reached the northern border, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the old stone shrine that marked the edge of what used to be Lyra's family land. The shrine was small, half covered in vines, forgotten by most of the pack for generations. They found Lyra kneeling beside a stone chest, her hands trembling as she held several old yellowed papers, but she was not alone. 3 men stood around her, members of Kale's own council, their faces hard and their postures threatening. One of them, an older man named Doran, held a torn scrap of parchment in his hand, the very page Lyra had shown Ren days before. "Give us the rest of the documents," Doran said, his voice low, "and we will let you return home quietly. Say nothing of what you found, and no one needs to know." Lyra did not move. "I will not stay silent while you steal my family's land." Kale stepped out from the trees, Ren close behind him. The council members froze at the sight of their king. "Doran," Kale said, his voice dangerously calm, "explain to me why you are threatening my wife on land that was never yours to claim." Doran's face paled, but he tried to recover quickly. "My king, this is a misunderstanding. She stole private records." "Records of a plan to steal her family's territory," Kale interrupted. "Ren has already told me everything. Do not insult me further with lies." The other 2 men exchanged nervous glances, clearly unwilling to defend a plan that was now falling apart in front of their king. Doran, seeing no way out, reached for the papers still in Lyra's hands, perhaps hoping to destroy them before Kale could read them himself. It was Ren who moved first. Though years of exile had left him quiet and often overlooked, Ren was not weak. He had spent those lonely years surviving in the forest, learning its paths, learning patience, and learning how to move quickly when it mattered. He stepped between Doran and Lyra, blocking the older man's reach. "You will not touch her," Ren said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Doran sneered. "You are nothing, a broken Omega no one wanted." "Maybe," Ren answered, "but I know these lands better than any of you. And I know the difference between loyalty and fear. You chose fear. I choose to stand here." Kale stepped forward then, his presence enough to make Doran finally step back, defeated. The other two men lowered their heads, unwilling to fight a battle they had already lost. Lyra rose to her feet, still holding the fragile documents that proved everything, the original land agreement, untouched by the false version created to deceive her family. She handed them to Cale, her hands finally steady. Cale read through them slowly, his expression darkening with every line. When he finished, he looked at Doran with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "You will leave Blackthorn Ridge," Cale said, "tonight, and you will never return." Doran opened his mouth to argue, but the look in Cale's eyes silenced him. Without another word, the three men turned and walked away, their positions in the pack gone forever. For a long moment, only the sound of the wind through the trees filled the quiet clearing. Then Cale turned to Lyra. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have questioned the sudden change in our arrangement from the beginning. I let my counsel convince me it was simply what needed to happen. I did not think to ask what it meant for you." Lyra studied him carefully, as if deciding whether to believe him. "You are listening now," she finally said. "That matters more than what happened before." Cale nodded, then turned to Ren. "And you? You risked everything to help her, knowing what it might cost you." Ren shrugged, though there was quiet pride in his eyes. "She listened to me when no one else did. I could not do any less for her." Cale studied him for a long moment. "Blackthorn Ridge owes you a debt, Ren. From this day, you are no longer an outcast. You will have a place among us, if you wish it." For the first time in years, Ren felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Not just relief, but hope. The three of them walked back toward Blackthorn Ridge, as the sky turned orange and pink with the setting sun. Lyra walked beside Cale, no longer as a stranger forced into marriage, but as someone beginning, slowly, to trust him. Ren walked a few steps behind, watching the two of them with quiet satisfaction, knowing that the truth he had helped protect had finally found its way into the light. By the time they reached the gates of the pack's home, word had already spread of what happened at the Northern Shrine. The pack that once doubted Lyra's loyalty now looked at her with new respect, and the Omega they had once called broken walked through those same gates, not as an outcast, but as someone who had proven, in the end, that strength was not always loud, and loyalty was not always measured by rank. That night, as the stars rose over Blackthorn Ridge, Cale stood beside Lyra on the balcony overlooking the forest where she had once run from him in fear and uncertainty. "Will you stay?" he asked quietly. Lyra looked out over the trees, thinking of everything that had happened, the fear, the danger, and the truth they had uncovered together. "Yes," she said, "not because I have to, but because now, I choose to." And somewhere below, in the quiet corners of the pack he once thought had forgotten him, Ren finally felt, for the first time in years, that he belonged.